Hey, good afternoon. This is Brian Freedman. I'm the Government Affairs Division Chairman for the Clear Lake Area Chamber of Commerce. Very happy to have you join us today for our one-on-one conversation with State Representative Dennis Paul. Our one-on-one webinar series will bring you closer to our elected officials at all levels of government, with a real focus on how the work that they do. Excuse me. Our one-on-one webinar series. Let's see. Now I'd like to introduce State Representative Dennis Paul with District 129 for joining us today. Good to see you, Dennis.
Good to see you.
I'd like to do a quick introduction. State Representative Paul is currently serving his third term in the Texas legislature. He's a lifelong area resident and small business owner. He received his bachelor's and master's degrees of science in civil engineering from the University of Houston and established his small business in the area in January of 2002. He's the only professional engineer in the Texas House. He's been quite active in the community, including with us here at the Clear Lake Area Chamber of Commerce, and has been involved in politics locally for over 20 years. As a state representative, he's focused on business issues, including economic development, infrastructure, flood mitigation, and many other initiatives to improve the economy throughout Texas and in the Clear Lake region. As a personal friend, he's been a big supporter of space exploration and the work at the Johnson Space Center, which is certainly something that's very important to me. And he also is the House Chairman of the Texas Space Caucus. It's great to have him with us today for our one-on-one discussion. Dennis, great to see you.
Great seeing you, Brian. I'm trying to work this device here so y'all can see me okay. Good to be with y'all. As Brian was saying, I've been a long-term member of the chamber. I think I've been in the chamber for at least 12, 15 years as a member. So it's good to be here with y'all today to discuss what's going on in the Texas legislature and hear all that's going on in the state. So glad to participate.
Awesome. Thank you. And Representative Paul, I know most folks on the line know you very well, but for those that don't, can you take a couple of minutes and share a little bit about your background outside of politics, and then maybe a little bit about your journey into politics and how you got into the, started your journey into the state legislature?
Okay. Well, that's about a 45-minute question, but anyway, I'm a native Houstonian. All y'all know Highway 3 here, so I grew up off Edgebrook and Highway 3 up there, we call Old Galveston Road. So just up the road, I've lived off this Highway 3 and that railroad track for my whole life, for almost 60 years, so pretty boring. But native of this area, I went to first of all, to San Jacinto College, and then to University of Houston, and got my bachelor's of science in civil engineering in '86, and I got a master's in '91. Started working full-time as engineer in 1988, and been running my own business since 2000 here, which I've located my business here in Clear Lake. So we're coming on 20 years of being in my business here as well. I'm a structural engineer by trade, and I designed buildings and worked on some very fabulous, multi-story, 50, 75-story buildings, as well as some really quite unique structures all over the world before I started my own firm. And here we've done some nice things in our area, like the Sea Scouts in Galveston, and some of y'all might go to St. Paul's Church in Nassau Bay. That was one of our structures, emergency management building in Galveston also. So we really kind of specialize in high wind and emergency type structures. So it's really quite fascinating to do it. My interest in politics has been around for 30 years, really my whole life. As a boy, reading history, I'm a huge history buff, and reading about what's going on with how our country was formed and our heroes like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln. So I always had an interest in public service and wanting to be a part of government one day, and always had real interest in what was going on in the state. And really at state level, I was on a state level for Republican Party for 8 years, serving in a position there. Then also for 6 years with the Knights of Columbus in a state position, as well as for 12 years on the Society of Structural Engineers Association of Texas, where I was on that state board of directors for 12 years. So I always had an interest in what was going on at the state level, and really wanted to serve in the legislature if that happened. When there was an opening in '98, I ran, and there was 6 of us in our primary, and I was able to get in a runoff and then win that, and then defeat a Democrat in the fall and been and serving ever since. So just got elected to a fourth term and up there making things happen now.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we are, as you are well aware, we are in the midst of legislative session, certainly a unique one, given the pandemic and the weather crisis and all the other things. Can you take a minute and just talk a little bit about the state of the legislature right now, just being in the Capitol building, what it's like with the COVID restrictions and other stuff going on? How's it working? How are you feeling about it?
I think it's going quite well. I mean, I think it works great. Right now, currently, if anybody wants to get in, well, you can go in the Capitol and not get I mean, you can get in the Capitol, walk around all you want without doing anything. If you want to go meet with people, a lot of people are asking that you get tested. We don't. If you want to come in our office, we're fine. But there is free testing out there, so I don't know who would go in there and not get tested and take 10 or 15 minutes, get a test, and then walk in the Capitol. Then you're free to go into anybody's office or whatever, as long as you got a band showing that it was tested. The House and the Senate got their own version. The Senate might be a little bit different, but I can tell you what we're doing in the House. It's really up to everybody's offices if they want to come in. There is going to be some restrictions on the number of people that can fit in a committee room because we're doing social distancing. So, and also we're not allowing big groups to meet. Like I know the chambers come up with BAHAP every year, and we would get them a big room and they could all, fit 200 people in a room and hang around. We're not able to do that. But all the people are still able to come and talk to whoever they want in person and make it work. It's just everybody's office is different. Now that the governor is lowering some restrictions next week at the House, we might lower some of those restrictions as well to make it easier to come in without. They are asking everybody to wear a mask when you're walking around the Capitol. So that's kind of where it's at right now with getting in and visiting. Might be some limits on the committees, but a lot of them are having overflow rooms where you can still sit up there and watch what's going on and then go testify. We're trying to make it as open as we can, Brian, and keep everybody safe.
Yeah, that's great. And how do you feel the virtual meetings are going? Do you feel more accessible to to your constituents and to other people, less accessible because there aren't as many people in the building? How do you feel about sort of that side of it and things like this, frankly?
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. I think I feel more accessible to people. We're able to do. I mean, this is our third Zoom event today that I've had to do. And so I think we can just really pack them in there, especially being at home where you were doing them. Before we would have to be driving to these events, where now I could do them right next to each other because they're on Zoom. People really get a chance to sit down and walk it. I mean, there's no replacement for person to person, but I think this really does a great job. And now we as Americans are all used to doing this and seeing this. I think we're all gonna be able to participate in doing it. Y'all get to see me wear my glasses. I can't watch the computer without it, right? But so I think it's helped a lot. And I think America is going to change. I think that we're going to find out that businesses are going to be able to operate more like this and have maybe some options of people working less in their office or having more of it. Businesses, especially something like downtown, maybe I don't need 200,000 square feet. I only need 100 and make things work. So I think it's, there could be some silver linings for this after it's all done.
Yeah, agree. And definitely the efficiency of being able to jump from one thing to the next has been a silver lining in some of this, getting used to all the new technology. I still want to stick with the pandemic for a minute, just because it's such a big deal and it has had such a huge impact on the business community. The governor's been in the news the last couple of days, as you mentioned, about rolling back the mask mandate and some of the reopening of Texas. Can you talk a little bit about the Texas House and what y'all have been watching and doing as it relates to the pandemic? And I'll just open up the door to talk about what the state is doing to inform people, and then your thoughts on the topic.
Sure. Well, what we're going to be looking at is we're attacking it through different ways. It's kind of like after Harvey. We had over 200 something bills that were all part of a Harvey situation. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be what worked and what didn't work, and what is law and what needs to be law. And so we're gonna have a lot of those bills and a lot of that discussion about what worked during this pandemic and what didn't work. We're going to have a lot of discussion about, government overreach or not enough reach. Was the governor doing too much? Was the governor too much on his side? Was he able to do all this without legislative insight? That we need to have more legislative insight or not? Could the counties do more, or the counties could do less? Were they overreaching and doing things with that? So I think there's going to be a lot of discussion on those levels of what can government do and what should it do, and really what is the role of the legislature in that. Some of this, obviously you can't have legislature meet every time, but it might be something like, say, hey, after 30 days of an emergency, we need to meet and talk about this. Can they change elections or not? What can they do or not? So I think we're going to have some very broad discussions, and I think there's going to be some major major pieces of legislation that are going to be dealing with this. The last time we even looked at emergency response was in 1975, and we're living under that law, which has worked fairly well for hurricanes, tornadoes, hail events, stuff like that. So, we obviously haven't had a major pandemic like this in 100 and something years. So we're going to reevaluate all that. And I think that's going to be the major piece of legislation that you see come out of it, as well as making sure we can fix things that we want to do, making sure that PPE is going to be able to flow properly and all that for the next pandemic. On the federal side, I was wanting them to kind of work on creating more of a fast track identifying these, kind of like a National Weather Service that would be a pandemic service that could identify these months in advance before it might hit the United States and have better planning on there. And obviously that's something on the federal. But I think you'll see a lot of interest in what was government's response, how did government respond, what worked and what didn't, and how can we make it better?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think the business community is going to be following very closely too, because a lot of these things are going to have impacts on the business community depending on how things are rolled out and how we react in future events. Are there one or two specific things that you'd really like to see in a bill that you thought were, examples of a job well done in the environment?
As far as pandemic, you're saying? Mm-hmm. Well, I think in general, I think the governor did a pretty good job. I think that was pretty good. I do think that we had some counties across the state that kind of went amok, and making sure that we have some little more consistent plans. So I want to make sure that we could have something consistent around the state and make things work, that the governor's going to be getting good advice. So I think probably setting up something where the governor could look at it. And I would actually like to have some more insight from the legislative on it. There's been some discussion about having a kind of like a budget board that we have where the governor's got some people on it, or, obviously the governor, the speaker, and lieutenant governor, as well as some additional House and Senate members that maybe kind of form a, pandemic committee that could make some of these decisions in lieu of one person. But, however we make that work and when it goes, there is a bill that's coming out of the House that's already started called HB 3 that will address some of this. Haven't seen the Senate's version yet, but that should probably be coming out soon. And then those are just starting points of where we're going to get with this to make it work. As far as things that I could see the improvement, like I mentioned, the PPE, stockpiling and making sure that progress is there and how we make it work. Making sure that these vaccines are going out evenly distributed. I proposed to them that they have one hub in each House district. Obviously that would even it out in the Senate districts as well. But since we're all pretty evenly distributed by population, if you have one of these hubs in each House district, that would be pretty well evenly distributed amongst the states. So I want to make sure that those are being distributed properly and that all of our citizens can get the vaccine if they so wish. So those are some things I would like to see improved.
Yeah, great. Thank you. The other big issue that I think is getting talked about quite a bit these days is the winter storm from a couple of weeks ago. I know a lot of our members had their houses impacted, their businesses impacted. Can you take a minute and just kind of run through from where you sit, what happened, how there was kind of the breakdown on the electricity side, and then what the state is looking at to make sure it doesn't happen again and that we can make our electric reliability even more robust?
Sure. You know, we've had House hearings that I'm sure a lot of you seen, and the Senate has had hearings. So we're still trying to dig into the why did it happen part. I think there's a lot of different reasons why. There's stuff from ranging from the natural gas wellheads were frozen and we couldn't get natural gas, or the pipeline might not have worked or needed a power got shut out, so they couldn't push things through the lines to get natural gas to the generators, to things that were frozen, to things that might have been offline, thinking that, hey, I can do maintenance at this time. The windmill system, you know, we rely on about 21% of our total energy generation from wind. You know, we're by far the most wind state in the nation. And, you know, when those had problems early on, you know, getting them back up and making them work, you know, because they were freezing and making things happen, you know, that caused us to have to get more generation from the natural gas or coal. You know, the nuclear power plant was off. And I still haven't heard anything of why that was not functioning. I didn't know those things would ever stop. So there's questions there of what was going on there that we still need to answer. You know, why were we generating 75,000 megawatts of power on Sunday at midnight, but Sunday at 1:30 we could only generate 50 megawatts of power? And there's more than one answer of why and where we're at. So that's the first part. You know, there could have been, you know, multiple reasons of why that power was shut off. The other part of this is going to be coming in as it comes in, and over the next several weeks, was, you know, since we're on a spot market where they're buying power as they need it, you know, we're into billions of dollars worth of power that had to be purchased because they were trying to get power up to keep the grid intact. And you know, how is that working, or how's that working? I mean, I heard some numbers up to $16 billion of power generation that had to be bought above and what we were. So how that's going to filter out, where that works, you know, who pays that? I mean, those are questions that are going to have to be evaluated. I know some of y'all might be seeing comments about folks that were getting $17,000 electric bills, and, you know, saying, hey, you could pay this off over 20 years. You know, so there's ridiculous stuff there. I know some of the bigger companies have testified during their testimony that they were going to say that, you know, their customers weren't going to get stuck with any kind of power bills like that. So we'll see how that works out. So that's the second part, cost of how it's going to work. The third part of this is, where do we go from here? How do we make sure that these things are winterized, that we don't have this problem? You know, what's realistic for us to do or not? You know, if there's a wellhead that freezes when it gets to 1 degrees, and, you know, we haven't got to 1 degree in 85 years, you know, who knows when the next one would be? You know, how much do we do there to make it work? So there's those kind of things are going to be coming in, and it's still very early in this process of seeing where we're at or having ideas to discuss about it. The other part of this was the add-on was water, and how was that affected by everybody? I mean, there was obviously busted pipes and things that we can't do a whole lot about, but there's a lot of this water shortage was that, hey, we didn't have generators that were running the pumps to make this work, or we didn't have generators to work this lift station, so we got to shut down our water supply or limit it due to that. I think that's unacceptable as well, and we got a bill that we filed to make sure that critical services from water to communications, maybe even oil and gas, are going to have emergency generator backup to make things happen, so that doesn't happen. And I have to say that I think the water groups in our area, Clear Lake City Water Authority, including the city of Houston, I know I've worked tirelessly on putting generators up over the last several years. We've even worked on some of those in my firm. So I know that there's a lot of that work going forward, and I know that those suppliers don't want to have a problem and would rather have a generator there to make it work. So we're seeing how that goes through and make sure that happens. Another bill that we were talking about this before the storm, and I've been working, as y'all know, tirelessly to do what we can help with infrastructure for how do we react to these storms? You know, when a hurricane comes through, from the coastal barrier to drainage to wind codes to making sure that we can take this. And one of these was power and energy. We got a bill that we got filed. We'll have to confirm if it's filed, but it's coming out where it makes it easier for power companies like a CenterPoint, who are the companies that transmit the power. They don't generate it, but they transmit the power, that they'll be able to have some backup situations, be a battery or generator, so that we'll be able to work in substations. So even if they might lose power, if ERCOT tells them to shut power off, they could have one of these mini power things inside Clear Lake City, say, and we'll be able to help generate power at a substation in Clear Lake, so Clear Lake could still get power, even though the rest of their service might have to be shut down. And we were working on that before this ever came up, so that bill's coming out as well. So we're working on solutions, Brian, as we can get to them.
Appreciate that. As we're kind of staying in these types of issues that are, significant ones for the community, I know you've been a leader in storm surge protection and coastal barrier protection. Any updates on how that's going at the state level? I know the state's been engaged in that discussion along with the federal folks. How's it going from where you sit?
Absolutely, Brian. We can talk about that. Senator Taylor and our staff, we've been working tirelessly over the last 2 years to come up with a solution for this. And let me kind of go through the steps a little bit as it works out. 3 years ago, we were able to receive funding of $4 billion for 3 smaller coastal barrier protection projects, which the Corps of Engineers called Sabine to Galveston. And through our effort with John Cornyn, we're able to get this thing funded and get it to us. So this $4 billion is here and on the ground and working. Those 3 projects, one is in Brazoria County, one is in Orange County, and one is in Jefferson County. We kind of call it the bookends of what we're trying to do here around Galveston Bay. But getting those up and running, we had a bill that we passed last session that was starting that. The bill that we're working on this session, which will be able to fully incorporate those 3 projects into a new entity, which we're calling the Gulf Coast Protection District, which will be able to incorporate those 3 walls that are already, like I said, already got funding, already in place. Corps has got contracts. One of them's even under construction. We'll be able to roll those into that. This is going to show the federal government that we're serious about how we make this work. And this is going to be able to be a way to receive those funds in that would come from the federal government, if they so hopefully fund it, to build the whole Galveston Bay coastal barrier protection system. This could be, $15-16 billion project. I think the Corps is actually looking at a full coastal Texas study, which is a $26 billion project to help projects all along the Texas coast. If this goes forward and we have, they build something that Corpus say, we could incorporate that into this district and expand it into those counties as well if needed. Currently, it's got the 6 counties that would include the 3 walls that are funded, plus what we would need for Galveston Bay. And so we're making it happen. We got to get this bill done this session. I think we feel confident that we will. I think we're getting good support from the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker seem interested in where we're going with this. Most of the members in the House that I've talked to seem pretty supportive. And I think Senator Taylor is getting good feelings from the Senate side as well to make this thing go forward. And I think that we're going to have this district created this session. We're going to be able to solve all the problems with the Sabine to Galveston going through this session and show that the federal government that we're there. In fact, we were on a call with the Corps yesterday with the lieutenant governor as well as the speaker's people, and the Corps was talking about how this district that we're working on creating and how we're solving it, and so far up in the front of all this in Texas, that they're looking at this for all around the nation to have an eyes on what we're doing here in Texas to see if they want to follow this in other states and make things happen. So they're very excited about us going forward with this. They feel they could sign all the contracts they need with this. So we're feeling pretty good about where we're at. We just got to get it done, get it over the finish line, get the governor's signature.
Great, thank you. Want to shift gears to a what I think is a fun topic, certainly one that I'm personally very interested in. Yesterday was Space Day at the Texas Capitol. I know you met with JSC Center Director Geyer and Bob Mitchell and a number of other folks about the state of space exploration in Texas, which is I think, a great news story all around. Can you talk a little bit about the space work in your district and how you've kind of been a champion in the legislature for the space industry?
Great question, Brian. And sure, as you mentioned earlier, the first thing we did in my first session, we created a space caucus in the House and Senate. It's a joint committee that's got House members and Senator members. We have a chair of the House and we have a chair of the Senate that are there to help guide and work on and promote space business all throughout the state. Like I always say, Houston is known as Space City, and we want to make sure Texas is known as the space state. And you can see that happening. I mean, there's so much businesses coming, all across the state, coming here to make things happen, to grow jobs. We obviously want to push Arlington Field and what the city has done there around the spaceport, which was the legislation that we got passed in 15 and strengthened in 17, to show that the spaceport's here and operational, what the city's doing there and expanding and locating businesses to come around that spaceport and make it happen. So we're promoting anything we can with those. We're promoting businesses locating here. We're promoting economic growth opportunities for business to make things happen, and really just showed some enthusiasm where we are for space industry. I was reelected as the chairman in the House, as you mentioned, for the caucus. And I'll tell you what, we've been really getting some great interest this session. We got about 18% of the members in the House and Senate both have already signed up and are members and interested in what we're doing. And we had a pretty good meeting this week, earlier in the week, where we okayed our bylaws and everything, elected our officers. So it's coming along, and I think that interest is really growing, that we know that this is a growth industry that we want to have for our state. It's a growth industry that I think we could have for our region, and I really want those businesses to be located here in Clear Lake, around the jewel of what is JSC, and what a fantastic operation that is, and critical for the state of Texas and critical for us to make things happen. There's programs like an Aerospace Scholars Program that we're just so heartily behind to keep those things going, and funding what we have at the state level, as well as our SATOP, where we have a group of NASA engineers that help out small businesses solve their technical questions and make things happen. And without that jewel of NASA, we're not going to have any of that happen. And so it's just interesting. I mean, I just get too excited about what's going on here. And as you know, we mentioned earlier, I'm an engineer, and anything that we could do to increase interest in STEM and make that happen. Even Director Geyer was talking about, China's interested in building a base on the moon and going back to the moon and making things happen. And we just have to make sure that we're the leaders in that we're the leaders in making that exploration happen, and that manned space flight is always going to be headquartered here in Houston, and that JSC is always going to make that work. So that's our commitment, to make sure that we support that organization, and then we get all those benefits of having that here and make it work. And we want to support the businesses that are here located around that jewel, that provide the jobs and the standard of living that we want to have for our citizens here. So we're excited about doing what we can.
Fantastic. And thanks for your leadership on the Space Caucus. That's a huge deal and a great benefit for all of us here in the region. Hey, we have about a minute left. So maybe in 30 seconds, could you just, in your words, why is state business so important to our members? Can you kind of connect the business that you're doing at the state and why that's important to the community and to the members of the chamber?
That's a fantastic question, Brian. And I think it is something that folks need to say. I'll try to be quick. The state really is going to affect your lives more than anything. People watch what goes on in Washington and all that, and it's fascinating and interesting. And unfortunately, Washington's getting too big. The government's getting too big. So that's the reason we have interest. But really, what goes on in the state's going to affect your day-to-day lives. It's going to affect how your governments work. It's going to affect what we do. Issues like a coastal barrier, issues about making sure that we have enough transportation, issues that make sure that we have a reliable grid, are all state issues. So it's really the Texas legislature that's going to be having a prominent role in your lives and how it affects your families. So it's something that we all need to watch and participate. A lot of people don't know when we're there or how often we're there, but we meet once every 2 years for 140 days. A lot of people say, hey, I'd rather meet for 2 days every 140 years and get out of my life. But it's those 140 days every 2 years that are critical. And we get a lot of work done in those 140 days. We look at maybe 8,000 pieces of legislation get filed, and we evaluate those and make things happen on it and pass legislation. The only thing that we have to do, Brian, every 2 years is pass a budget. And we have a good open transparency process of how we do that. We have no debt. We don't pay, we can't do debt like they do in Washington. We pay as you go. So, and we provide billions of dollars. I mean, our budget last time was $220 billion of effort, second largest state in the union, as you know. So it's a great organization that does a great job for serving our citizens, and really hope the folks pay attention to what's going on. And I know members of your chamber do, and hear from folks like Senator Taylor and myself, or other neighboring reps around here. So great question, Brian, and we're there for you.
Appreciate that. Well, Representative Paul, I think that is about all the time we have. So I wanted to give you a sincere thank you for spending the time with us and sharing a little bit about what's going on in the legislature. I know we covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. I wanted to thank everybody online for joining us today. I'd ask you to mark your calendar for our next one-on-one conversation on March 25th with Houston Mayor Pro Tem Dave Martin. You can also go online to the chamber website at clearlakearea.com anytime for some of the other upcoming programs. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.